guest for this Farm Show TV episode is Assistant Deputy Minister of Ag, Paul Johnson, joining me virtually. It is the way of the world these days. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Sabine.
So it's no secret, we are obviously talking about a year in review and a year forward, looking ahead. We might as well just get right into it and talk about how we saw 2020 affect the ag industry.
Yeah, certainly a great way to start. 2020 was difficult for all of us, including the ag industry and individuals within the ag industry, Sabine. I think probably the biggest impact that we saw in the last year was that to our livestock sector, specifically our producers themselves, but also the processors, and they're very closely related. Um, there was some pandemic, some COVID cases within the processing sector, both in Saskatchewan and other jurisdictions as well, that impacted our producers. It in some cases restricted their ability to deliver their livestock for processing, and therefore had some significant price impacts as well for that sector. On the other side, the crop sector surprisingly had a very good year. We produced the second largest crop on record, which is very encouraging, and there was very little supply chain disruption in the crop sector. So pretty fortunate on that front, Sabine.
So we saw kind of, both sides of the coin when it comes to how the pandemic affected the ag industry, obviously within the industry itself, like you just mentioned, livestock, and then of course the crop sector. Was it surprising to see those numbers when we look at the crop sector?
I guess surprising, yeah, because really the crop sector is largely dependent on rainfall and moisture, and there was major challenges there. But um, you know, it, the right growing conditions just came together this year for the large part of our production sector, our crop sector. Not everybody, I should mention that, not everybody had a fantastic year, but the majority did, and it all came together for a really large crop, for which we're pretty thankful for. And I think it also speaks, Sabine, to the technologies that our producers are employing out there that allows them to produce that kind of a crop, even without the best conditions possible.
So it's always nice to focus on the little bright light wherever it may shine. You touched on technology, and it's kind of the direction I want to go to for my next question. Obviously, what we're doing right now, technology has been very helpful when we're dealing virtually, connecting with people, especially what we had to do a lot of through 2020. We saw a lot of folks stepping outside of the boxes and finding ways to adapt to quarantine and lockdown. Was there any kind of innovative ways we saw the ag industry having to adapt or be innovative in how they were dealing with business or their own sector and industry?
Yeah, absolutely. And as the saying goes, Sabine, adversity drives innovation, and agriculture, our ag industry, was certainly involved with that. And yeah, you touched on it. A lot of the way that our industry connects is in person. We have a lot of field days. The industry has field days and extension events that just weren't possible in 2020. So, today, right now, as we speak, the crop sector, a lot of the crops groups are having their annual general meetings virtually, and I think that's pretty innovative for many. And as a ministry, we also provide a large extension service across the province. So we weren't able to do that in person this year. So again, that went virtual this year, which was pretty innovative. And I think I can say with some confidence that there was a very high success rate there this year, both for us and for the industry groups that were also having those types of connections virtually. So that worked out pretty good. There was also some innovations on the supply chain. I mentioned already the issues with the processing sector, particularly in the livestock area. We saw our processors move quickly and innovate very quickly to mitigate COVID once it was in their facility, and also to prevent it from entering their facility. So lots of innovation as usual in the ag sector this year, which was certainly beneficial.
It sounds like, I don't want to say they were able to return to normal, but they were able to continue kind of, I don't want to say business as usual either, but they were able to find ways, like you just said, being innovative and seeing things return to as normal as they could, if that's the correct way I can say it. Would you say it's on the path of going back to normal, or would you say there is a new normal that we may have to see a new angle when we look at the ag industry?
Yeah. Well, I think 2020 really reminded us there is no such thing as normal in agriculture. Whether again that be production conditions here in Saskatchewan, markets in Saskatchewan, markets internationally. I mean, it's one thing our industry is very, very used to adversity and has proven very resilient and innovative to deal with that. So, what is normal for agriculture is a really interesting question. But we do hope for better in 2021, specifically in terms of the livestock industry and for our processing sector. And we certainly look for normal supply chain functionality. And this this applies broader than livestock. We were fortunate on the crop side that our supply chain functioned very, very well in 2020. But it's not to say it will continue to function in 2021 as good as it did last year. So we're certainly hoping that the normal supply chain functionality continues to be there for our producers this year.
And I guess that obviously leads into moving forward and looking ahead into 2021. Obviously, we're seeing that, talk, not even just talk, we're seeing people starting to get the vaccine, and we're seeing the direction, hopefully, where we want it to be heading into. Where do you see the ag industry heading into 2021?
Well, I mean, certainly the vaccine, the rollout of the vaccine gives us all optimism. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly not going to be the only solution for the ag industry moving forward, but it's absolutely welcomed that. Again, having healthy people in a resilient, innovative sector, that adds up to another good, successful year, and another optimistic year ahead. I think for agriculture. Um, we introduced the Saskatchewan Plan for Growth in 2019. We've got some very ambitious targets in terms of crop production, livestock revenues, value-added processing, and exports. And again, healthy people in a resilient, innovative sector. I think there's a lot of room for optimism in agriculture ahead.
I want to thank you for taking the time to chat with me today. I just have one more question, and then we'll let you go because I know you're quite busy. But what I wanted to ask, I feel like we've all learned lessons through everything that we've kind of dealt with throughout the pandemic. And what would you say we've learned, or what has the pandemic taught us when it comes to the ag industry in specific?
Yeah, there's some really, really good learnings in there, Sabine. And as I mentioned earlier, the ag industry is um, really good at dealing with change and managing change. But I think some of the key things that I would highlight there is expect the unexpected. We certainly didn't prepare for this type of pandemic, and be prepared specifically. For a workplace, do you have a pandemic plan available to you? What if you or some of your employees get the virus? And on an individual producer or farm level, what's your pandemic plan? Be prepared. I think the other major learning from 2020 is, and this was something that all of us were reminded of, is that food security is essential. The supply chain functionality, we depend on that in Saskatchewan, but we're very also dependent on other jurisdictions for our supply chain, for processing, for input supplies, those types of things. And in some instances, that's a bit of a risk. So it also aligns well with one of our goals to grow the value-added processing sector in Saskatchewan, add more value to our products here. It supports food security, local food production, many different things. So I think that's a learning, is that food security is essential. We as a jurisdiction need to do all that we can to enhance the food security and food supply and supply chains domestically. And to that point, and this will be my last point, Sabine, is that the announcement this last year on the major irrigation expansion lends to all of that. It lends to food security. It lends to supply chain management. It lends to value-added processing, and we're very, very excited about what that means for the future of agriculture in this province.
More work, more employment, hopefully helping out as many people as we can, especially here in the province. I do have one last follow-up, and then I promise I'll let you go. You talked a lot about what we've learned with this pandemic. For those who maybe in need of some help or advice, or working in the business, a local producer, where would you suggest that they can go to get more information or any advice that they may need?
Yeah, well, there's a couple things there. I mean, for one, we have the Ag Knowledge Center, which is really our focal point for all things agriculture in Saskatchewan. So people can reach out to the Ag Knowledge Center. I don't have the phone number at the tip of my tongue, but it's certainly very accessible and all things agriculture. But I think the other important point, and this was also a learning, I guess, from 2020, Sabine, is that mental health is a major concern. And
Yes.
we know there's mental health issues across Saskatchewan with the farm community, with the agriculture sector. And I'll just remind people that the farm stress line does run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's available to help people who are struggling through the pandemic. And just this last year, we also partnered with Innovation Saskatchewan on the Innovation Challenge on a new mental health application that will certainly help people identify when they're facing mental health issues, and then some resources to deal with that as well. So it's another important reminder from 2020.
Absolutely, very important issues that we need to make sure we're still talking about and helping those who need it most. Assistant Deputy Minister of Ag, Paul Johnson, joining me today. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat, and hopefully we'll chat again in the near future.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Sabine. Bye for now.
Thank you.